Hello and welcome to today's episode. In today's episode of the SP podcast, we are speaking to Jacob Wilkinson. He is an osteopath who has grown significantly in the space in recent years and now operates multiple practices alongside being an athlete and athletics coach. He has spent his whole life in the world of sport and performance, and today we are discussing injuries, rehabilitation, and how to prepare for competition. An interesting question really is how are you balancing being an athlete and a business owner with multiple locations?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. It's something that I think me in particular, I'm very, very lucky that the cards have fallen in the right way. So being an athlete, I train 5, 6 days a week. So trying to balance that around my work schedule can be quite difficult. But because I've set up my own practices, 3 days in one practice, 2 days in another practice, depending on where I am, I can bias my training to suit that. So, for example, Monday's my rest day, so that's my longest day. It's a 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. day. Then Tuesday is a bog standard 9 till 5, 9 till 6, and I'm able to go and train afterwards. I'm able to train in the gym, things like that. And then when I drive back from Wiltshire, which is where my first practice is, into Cardiff, where I live, I've been able to tweak my schedule to be able to make training in the evening. So I think the fact that I'm self-employed with two practices just makes it a little bit easier in the respect of I can tweak when and where I can work around my training, because it's something that's very fortunate for someone in my line of work, but not fortunate for everyone else, is that pain is always going to be an important thing. So if I have an appointment available, someone's going to want to fill it because someone's going to be in pain. So having that variability of working around training times is actually quite good for my job, because it means that people who don't conform to a normal 9 to 5 work schedule are actually still able to see someone. So it's quite odd in the fact I'm able to change things around to meet my training, but it actually suits the demand of the patients as well. So that's why I think I'm quite lucky with that. But no, it's a very, very unique balance that's quite hard to maintain at times, because as we all say, when you're setting up a new business, the business is the priority. You need to be self-sufficient. That's your primary source of income. That's your main area of focus. So being able to then make it more amenable and malleable around my other commitments is actually quite lucky. I think. I don't think a lot of people have that.
Yeah,
Have that
well,
luck.
I agree. I'm in a similar position. Obviously, I'm not training in the same regard as you in terms of regular competition, but yeah, it's a nice element in terms of
Mm.
having that flexibility. How do you find the difference between back when we were both a lot younger and we were training together at university, and we had all the time in the world to kind of focus on competition? How do you find the difference? Do you find it more challenging? Do you find it, what do you find the difference is between being basically a full-time athlete at university to then being, in essence, still a full-time athlete in terms of training volume, but having this extra kind of
Yeah,
stressor in your life?
I find it actually, it's going to sound a little bit odd. I actually find it easier, because when you're at university and you're studying something like osteopathy or something like that, it's not a type of course where you've got few minimal contact hours. You've got 20, 25 contact hours a week plus placement and things like that. And then you've got all the assignments and the exams and revision and practical revision that you have to do around it. So balancing my commitments in terms of trying to train as a full-time athlete whilst doing all of this course content, I always found was quite difficult. So then when you qualify and you go and you set up and you're working, even though the dynamic of what you're doing changes, you're much more hands-on, because when you're in placement, you'll see maybe 6 patients a day. I'll see that in a morning now. So even though the dynamic of the type of work changes and it's much more physical, much more dynamic, because I'm not just sat there revising or writing an essay, I find the cognitive side of it, the energy that I use, is actually a lot less. So I find I'm actually able to train a bit easier, a bit better, and I'm going to have ups and downs in my training based on my work schedules and things like that. So I know after Wednesday, when I've finished 3 days in one practice, I'm always going to be exhausted. So I know not to expect much on my Wednesday session. Um, but I actually find it easier because I don't have all of the follow-up things I have to do at home later. I can leave work at the door, and it
Interesting.
makes it just a little bit less energy demanding overall, not just when I'm at work.
Yeah. No, I know, I get it. Makes sense. In terms of, as I say, I'm not training in the same regard you are right now, but it is nice, like you say, to have that kind of flexibility in terms of, it's your business, isn't it?
Hmm.
In terms of both of us, in terms of our professional side, our main overlap really is injuries, right?
Yeah.
Especially kind of athletes with long-term injuries, long-term rehab plans, and kind of out of commission for more like months and potentially even years rather than days and weeks.
Hmm.
Um, from our side of things, we obviously have to work somewhat in line to kind of help these athletes through. But from your side of things, what do you think are the biggest struggles, as an athlete who has maybe a meniscus tear or an ACL or anything like that? How do you find that rehab process, and where do you think the common kind of struggles are really?
It's a very good question. So there's a couple of big parts in terms of the physical, anatomical, physiological side of it, and then obviously there's the whole realm of psychology that is, I will be the first to admit, not my area of expertise. Obviously, that's yours. Um, from the anatomical, physiological side of injury, one big factor that I've got to deal with a lot of the time is misdiagnosis. Because unless you're getting an MRI scan or something like that to put the pin in exactly what it is, there is a grey area and sometimes a lapse in clinical judgment. So I've had a few times when someone's come in and they've had something happen and they've been misdiagnosed because the rehab protocols can vary. So what they're doing is they're then rehabbing the wrong thing and the pain isn't going away. And then I can completely imagine that would impact their psychology because why is the pain not going away? I was given this 6, 8, 10 week rehab structure and it's not made a difference. And I feel like I'm back at square one. So that's one big thing, is making sure you get the right diagnosis at the start, um, and having it evolve and develop as you go. So that's a big factor that I've got to deal with. But also it's the easy stuff in terms of do this, do that. You've got to bend your knee this way. You've got to straighten your knee that way. You've got to weight bear. You've got to reduce twisting, whatever it is. Um, so there's two sides to it. It's the rehab of what it is, and that's then compounded by actually the first part, which is working out the problem. And unfortunately, a lot of people can't afford to go for private MRIs, and the doctors have a massive waiting list for MRI scans. So for those that can't necessarily afford to get the right scan or get something like that, for example, they get an X-ray through the doctor, and the doctor goes, "Oh, there's nothing that's come up on your X-ray. You must be fine." Yeah, but they're not looking at any of the soft tissues. They're not looking at the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, anything like that, because that won't show up the vast majority of the time on an X-ray because it's the wrong scan. So getting that first point is a lot harder than doing the follow-up stuff. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's a big financial difficulty for people because of the level of waiting lists in the NHS, things like that. So then things get missed as well. And then that's when you've got to always review, always reevaluate. And that's why things need to develop as you go. But then one thing I'm seeing is my patients who have this rehab injury protocol in place, one big thing that they struggle with is the emotional side of injury and how that impacts them, because they can do, like I said, it's the easy bit is doing the rehab work because your body will heal independently. The hard part is coming to terms with it a lot of the time and things like that, which again, it's something that is out of my realm of expertise, and that's something that you are much more educated in than someone like myself.
No, I agree. I think, from my point of view, like you say, you've obviously got the diagnosis and you've got the rehab. From the more mental side, you've got two real strands. You've got the kind of self-belief aspect in terms of I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing the right thing and I'm going on the path to recovery, which is obviously important. and that comes from having the right diagnosis and the right rehab planning to believe in what they're doing. But like say, the other side is that more emotional side where if you're training a team sport or even individual sport where you train with others, watching those others train and compete and potentially improve significantly while you feel like you're sidelined, you are obviously improving, but you're improving in terms of getting back to the start, which is
Mm.
training again. That can always be difficult where it feels like you're sidelined and you're kind of separate from the training group. So
Mm.
from my point of view, is obviously balancing those two things. One, keeping that belief that the rehab is working. That comes obviously working with yourself as well, where it's those tiny steps and those kind of small goals and ticking things off along the journey if it's a long one. Combine that with the fact that you've got keeping them in the loop with terms of their emotions, but also with their training groups and with their kind of social side of sport as well, because it's a really underestimated part of sport, I feel, where those
Massively,
kind of training
massively.
partners and things like that. It's a big part of your life where you're kind of going on this journey with others around you. And if you feel like you're taking a step to the side of that journey, not being a part of it, it feels like something's missing from your life,
Mm.
really.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because from as you were talking, then it resonated with me because the more stressed that you are, the higher levels of cortisol, cortisone, stress hormones you've got in your body, the worse your body heals. So having that psychological stressor of how is it impacting me, how is it impacting my team, am I feeling isolated, am I not feeling involved, am I not part of a team anymore because I'm injured, that could then have a negative result in terms of it's not going to stop tissue healing, but it might reduce the rate of which that happens, which can then prolong the injury itself. So the fact that that's something that you've mentioned is a really, really interesting part, which resonates with me quite a lot because it's something that has a physiological link.
Yeah, it's a really interesting part, right? In terms of obviously our collaboration and our fields kind of working together. It's a case of that kind of multidisciplinary side where you've got
Mm.
potentially strength conditioning, you've got physio, you've got osteo, you've got psychology, you've got all these elements all together, all trying to work in unison with the single goal of get this athlete back fit, healthy, happy, and kind of driven and ready to go. Which is sometimes easier said than done in terms of difficult injuries or injuries that are out for a while. But if everyone works in line together, you can keep all of
Yes,
these elements moving forward, and then hopefully, for the betterment of the athlete, we can get them back, ready to kind of carry on pushing forward.
definitely. And it's the whole idea of it's something that I say to my patients is a lot of the injury risk a lot of the injuries that occur comes from the body's lack of preparation for it. So what one of the big rehab protocols I get and I implement is to get them conditioned for the actual problem that caused the injury in the first place. So with that regard, it's the whole idea of you can then drive it as you won't just be back, you will be better because it's not only rehabbing this injury, but it's trying to stop it coming back. And that's something that I think is really, really important to drive uh, to the patient during that rehab process. Is that if they do the right stuff, it's not only going to make them able to get back to their sport, it's going to make them a better sportsman or sportswoman
Yeah,
in the first place.
and I think that's a really good avenue and focus for athletes, because it as you go back to the kind of headspace side, it still feels like you're improving. It's not
Yeah,
that I've taken 10 steps back and I've got to take 10 steps forward to get back to zero. It's a case of actually I'm improving in a different element of my sport. And then I've done similar aspects in terms of if I'm working with an athlete and they're out for a while, be it meniscus tear, ACL, or whatever, spending some time on another aspect of their game. Be it psychological side, be it game understanding, be it being involved in the sport in a different capacity. They're still improving. They're just improving in a slightly different way than just physiologically on the court, on the track, on the field, whatever it is they're doing. So,
mm.
no, I think like you say, it's a really interesting part and something which a lot of kind of coaches and athletes don't utilize
Mm.
enough when it comes to this injury. It's you're injured, you'll come back when you're ready, and it's kind of you're off to the side, rather than
Yeah.
actually there's a lot of progress to be made. Taking that sideward step, and then you can continue moving forward. Really.
Oh, definitely, definitely, and it's the whole idea of I think a lot of it comes down to perception, which obviously, like I said, is a big part of the psychology that you'll be having to deal with. But from the physical rehabilitation side of it, it's yes, injuries, not something that anyone wants to go through, and it sidelines you for a while, and then there's that rehab and development. But it's often, like you just said, it's often an opportunity to work on other parts. So whether it's game management, skills, things like that, or whether it's from the physical side of it and it's conditioning you in a different way to stop this sort of injury happening again. It's always beneficial for it to be perceived as an opportunity to have personal growth and develop as an athlete so that you're a better version, a better iteration of yourself when you get back into your sport.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and that kind of leads me into what I was going to ask you next, in terms of obviously you've developed a wealth of knowledge in the last decade or whatever, in terms of study, in terms of obviously seeing athletes in your practice, and
Mm.
obviously being an athlete yourself. If you could go back in time and speak to young teenage Jacob who was setting out in their sporting journey, what kind of what advice would you give them? If you could use the path that you've already trodden to go back
Mm.
and kind of aid them, be it something you've learned as an athlete or something you've learned as an osteo, what advice would you give yourself to kind of make that journey a little bit easier or a little bit kind of more simple for that performance side?
Mm. So very, very interesting question. And what the one thing that I would really, really resonate with a young version of myself is do the little things. And what I mean by that is I was sidelined for 2 years on ankle injuries, which, going back to my prior point, misdiagnosis, things like that, I would have to diagnose myself because the diagnosis of other different practitioners in different professional fields sometimes missed things. And then I would do the rehab that they would suggest and it wouldn't work. Um, and I can't help but look back and go, well, if I'd done the right conditioning steps, if I'd done the right little things, just working on my proprioception, my balance, my tendon stiffness, if I had been working on that a couple of years sooner, then that wouldn't have happened in the first place.
Yeah,
And maybe that comes from my experience now as an osteopath and athletics coach, but maybe it also comes from my experience being the injured athlete myself. Um, I can't help but think about, if I had a chance to do it all again, what can I do to stop it happening in the first place? And so
yeah,
that's what I'd probably recommend. Is a lot of people, they take training at face value, and they go and they train and they go home and they don't do anything. I would say do the little things. Make sure you're dotting the i's, crossing the t's. A lot of it is boring. A lot of it is just kind of out of necessity. But if you do all the little things right and you're truly passionate for your sport and you're driven to improve, you will see a much, much bigger physiological adaptation and physical improvement in your sport from doing the little things right.
yeah.
So that's probably what I'd say. It's, and again, like I said, it's probably conjunction of coming from me being the practitioner side of it, but also seeing it from the patient, the injured athlete side of it. Um, to kind of get both experiences. But no, that's what I'd really, really highlight.
No, I totally agree. From my side of things, it resonates with me where as a junior I was a tennis player. I trained all the time. I was a typical young teenager where the mobility and the warm ups and the warm downs and stuff weren't necessarily the priority. I want to get on court, I want to hit some balls. And then it took the part of having a kind of serious elbow injury where I was sidelined for months and months and could barely like hold the racket, to then go, right, go to the physio, these are the exercises I need to be doing, this is the mobility work, this is the problem you've got with your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist, all this stuff then gets highlighted. And it's then being reactive, isn't it? Where you're going, okay, now I need to fix it, rather than, like, say, the little steps being proactive, good warm up, good warm down, good kind of protocols around, mobility or anything like that. It can prevent so much down the line, where for my example, my elbow was never really the same afterwards. Now years and years and years later, it's fully functioning, it's fine, but it's never really
Got
felt
back to
completely perfect.
100%.
And that's because obviously like that damage was done.
Mm.
I've gone through and done rehab and recovery and all this kind of stuff still, but if I could go back in time and fix that myself, it would make a big difference. Would make a
Massively.
big difference. In terms of maybe progression in the sport, where I'm playing and not having months and months off at a time, but also having that side of thing where I potentially build that strength and that mobility at a younger age, rather than waiting until I'm a washed up old athlete to be going and doing all these mobility movements and kind of working
Yeah,
on all this stuff. So
yeah.
no, I totally agree with that one.
And
Um,
that's something as well, is the whole idea of what you just said, consistency. And
yeah,
what I see in terms of the physiological adaptation, a lot of injury happens when your body is, like I said, it's unable to tolerate the load you're wanting to put on it. It's unprepared for the movement pattern. It's not stable through its full range. It's then more vulnerable to something going wrong. And a lot of that comes from consistency. And if people aren't consistently doing the right things, they're not consistently turning up. They're turning up as and when they want. It's the rule of thirds. You only turn up when you feel good,
yeah,
and you don't turn up 2/3 of the time when you either feel great, or when you either feel not great but okay, or you feel pretty terrible. If you have the consistency, not only of doing the rehab prehab, but also just turning up to training and having the consistency, you're ingraining better motor patterns, you're ingraining better physiological adaptation opportunities, and that in itself will reduce injury risk as well. So it's something that, like you said, it's injury takes you out, and you can't get that consistency because you're out from injury. But in doing so, it then makes you less prepared for the movement that you're wanting to get back into. So it's that whole idea of trying to stop it becoming a problem before it becomes a problem.
yeah.
It's
And I
the
think that
preventative, not just the rehab.
yeah, and it's consistency when not being observed. I think is
Absolutely.
the key. Where I've seen this. I've gone to work with a player, let's say tennis player, for example. They've, let's say, had an injury or niggle or whatever. Their coach or their S&C coach or physio has given them their exercise to do before warming up. We're going to jump on court and play some points and do some stuff that way. And then they walk up and pick up their racket. And I'm like, well, you haven't done the exercises who, XYZ has given you. Oh,
Mm.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's like, no, you need to take ownership of that. Luckily, I know you're meant to be doing that because part of that kind of multidisciplinary team, having those communications with physio, S&C, coach, whatever. But again, it's that they'll do it when the coach is there because they know that's what's expected. But it's
Yeah.
actually doing it as expected all the time, even when no one's
Mm.
watching, which is
Absolutely.
obviously uh, something you learn as an adult needs to get done because otherwise pain follows with injuries. But
Mm.
when you're younger, it is a thing you've got to kind of ingrain into yourself,
Yes, yeah,
really.
yeah. It's the discipline,
Yeah,
and a lot of the time, it's something that all the greatest athletes will tell you. It's also the greatest footfall is, they only do the hard work when someone's watching. No,
yeah,
all the best athletes are doing the work, doing the hard graft, the stuff that isn't necessarily going to be fun right in the moment, but they're doing it for the discipline. They're doing it because it works. They don't care whether people are watching or not, because it's all about, okay, this is the work I need to do. And
yeah.
from
It's
the
a process.
physical, exactly.
Yeah,
And from the physical therapy side of it, you can kind of get an indication from looking at the athlete. Okay, you're injured. We've given you this rehab protocol. 3 weeks down the line, we're reassessing. Have you done the stuff? Have you
mm,
done the exercises? Have you done the right rehab? A lot of the time, we can get an indication just from how your body's presenting about
mm.
whether you're actually doing it or not. And so we know. And then there's that cross referral, as you said, where we can then talk to the sports psych who's talking about the emotional, psychological side of the injury. And it might be something that they need to help address as well, because it's not something that we can just drive home of do the exercises. It's, yeah, as sooner or later they're going to shut their ears to it. So you need to have a different avenue to be able to resonate that importance.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that links into where I was going to go next in terms of if you obviously this is, let's say, junior athletes as an example, right? A lot of their kind of view and a lot of their behavior is shaped by their parents, right? In terms of
Yeah.
they go to training when they're told to go to training, they go to a doctor when they're told to go to a doctor, they go to tournaments that their parents have booked them in for,
Hmm.
etc. So if you were giving kind of injury prevention tips to parent. If you're a parent who, let's say, don't know a lot about the sport your child competes in, maybe you've been an athlete, maybe you haven't, but it's a sport you're not super familiar with. You want them to thrive, you want them to be healthy and enjoy their sport. What advice would you give them to kind of help their child not only thrive in the sport, but also kind of stay injury free and stay kind of fit and healthy while still taking advantage of all the training opportunities they've got?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. Firstly, it's what you can do at the competition, at the tournament. It's the warm up, it's the cool down, and the whole principle of a warm up, which a lot of people don't. They go, oh, just have a little bit of a stretch, whatever. But what it's meant to do is meant to prime your body, and you're raising your peripheral temperature without raising your central temperature. So what you're doing is you're getting the warm up going. You're not raising your general temperature, but the blood is pumping to the muscles. You've got a vascular shunt. You've got the oxygen going to the muscles. You're priming the muscles, so you have a smaller oxygen debt when you're doing your sport. So what that is essentially when you first do your sport and you get that great big spike in your heart rate, is because you're going from a state of sedation to a state of high metabolic demand. And you then get what's called oxygen debt, which is basically when your body uses loads and loads of oxygen all in one go, but you don't have the supply of oxygen to your muscles, and so you accrue lactic acid and debt and things like that. So priming you in the right way, one, will make you better at your sport because it means that you're not getting as much oxygen debt because you're already addressing that extra metabolic demand by getting the blood flow to the periphery better. So that's one thing that I would really highly recommend my patients, athletes at home who aren't injured, to do. Is, I know it sounds a bit like a broken record, but do your warm-ups, because it helps for a reason, and that will vary depending on the sport. For example, you're not going to warm up your elbows for sprinting, whereas you are going to out of a high level of necessity for tennis.
Yeah.
So it varies depending on the sport, but you've got to get your peripheral temperature raised so that you're not risking getting extra metabolic stress from oxygen debt. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is conditioning, general conditioning. As I said earlier on, a lot of the time injury happens when the body is not prepared for the movement you want it to do, or it's fatigued, or it's unstable, and as a result it's vulnerable. Just general conditioning, it doesn't have to be sport specific, particularly for youngsters. It doesn't have to be sport specific, but keeping them active, doing things with them when they're younger that's increasing their general activity, will condition their muscles better and be a preventative for injury, because mobility only has if I recall correctly, it only has a roughly 4% reduction in injury risk from being mobile, but stability has a way over 60% injury reduction and reoccurrence percentage. So being strong in a full range of motion is one of the best things you can do for injury prevention. And like I said, that doesn't have to be sport specific. That can be being able to squat, or that can be running around with your friends. But being active and using your body is one of the best things you can do to prevent injury actually happening in the first place. So that kind of precedes that oxygen debt, metabolic demand that comes from warm up. That is something that you should just be doing, not just for tournaments. That should be something you should be doing in everyday life. It will get your heart rate up. It will get your cardiovascular system activated. You'll be healthier in that regard because you're using your body. You're then getting a better vascular shunt, which then goes into my warm-up point. But you are conditioning your body. You are conditioning your muscles, your tendons, to then be able to take extra stresses that it wouldn't be able to do if you weren't active in the first place. So those are the two things that I'd really recommend. The first one is do your warm-up. Don't be lazy with it. Do the little things. Don't do too much of a warm-up to the point where your central temperature raises, but you need to get the blood to the muscles. You need to prime them. Preceded by be active outside of your sport, whether it's going to circuit training or going to the gym, or whether it's playing a different sport, or whether it's going for walks, whatever it suits the person, especially when we're talking about age group differentials. You've got to find something to keep your body active outside of your sport.
And I think to add to that, I think the overarching point here is to kind of, for the parent side of things, is to really educate themselves on why.
Yes.
The coach can say, when they go to tournament, I want them to do this warm up. I want them to do this afterwards. I want this warm down. I want them to do this outside of training. But if they can understand why, it's a lot easier, A, for them to obviously prioritize it because they know it's important. For example, like you said about injury prevention around stability, saying to someone around what the numbers are, what importance is, helps their education, and then they can then portray that to the child. I think where a lot of potentially coaches miss the mark in terms of this is when they are giving the information to parents. They say, do this, fine, important, but also, like you say, it's
But
why are
why?
they doing it, and why is it crucial they don't miss it? Why is it
Yes.
crucial
Yeah.
an athlete doesn't miss the warm up? If you're running late to a tournament and you've only got a couple of minutes, you still need to do a warm up. It might not be the perfect warm up, but you need to do something to get ready.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
walking out there with no preparation, anyone who follows my content regularly is going to know that I'm a massive fan of kind of mental warm ups as well. But that's a completely different topic. We will do a different time. But in terms of getting ready physically for competition, you don't want to have, if you turn up to a venue late or you're rushed or you're whatever, they need to know that they need to, even if it's 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, they need to be as ready as physically possible because there's an important aspect to this. It's not doing it just because your coach says so, or your osteo says so, your physio says so. You're doing it because you need it. And I think that's where, this parental education side is really important, really, where they can obviously understand it and then really promote it, be it on the way to the competition or be it getting involved, doing a warm up with their child or whatever, especially at competitions when there's no coaches and stuff present.
Definitely. Definitely. And it's something that I see both from my coaching perspective, but also from the clinical side of with my osteopathy, is it's the why. I can
Yeah,
do I can have relative success saying, right, you do this, but I'll have
yeah,
so much better success saying you need to do this because.
yeah,
And it's the if you develop an understanding and the patient or the athlete or the parent develops an understanding of why they're doing something, they'll assimilate it so much better. They'll be so much more amenable in their routines to actually add rehab exercises in, add warm-ups in, whatever it is. But if you avoid the why and you leave that open-ended question, it's not going to have anywhere near as much of a pronounced effect in terms of
yeah.
getting them to actually do what they need to do. So as you said, I completely agree. It's the why, and you have to resonate both from my side and from your side. It's like again that cross referral. We
Yeah.
really have to drive home the why, not just the what.
It really shapes that kind of intrinsic motivation side, really, where if you say to an athlete, right, if you warm up in the correct way, you're going to be more, ready to go and more mobile and have a higher chance of winning. Okay,
Mm.
I want to win. So to do that, I need to do X, Y, Z. Okay,
Yes.
it's worth the effort. Rather than I need to do this because coach told me to. Or I need to do this because Jacob told me to do it. Well, there's no reason to do it. They don't have a drive behind it. Rather than if you say, I know this isn't true, but if you said 20% chance, 20% better chance to win the match if you warm up. I don't know what the real number would be, but suddenly you would immediately be, locked in. I need to do this
Mm.
because that is a huge game changer. In reality, it
Yeah.
is a game changer, but it's also the case of it's creating that understanding, especially with the kind of younger junior athletes where they are kind of potentially new to competing or even new to the sport in general. It's promoting that from a young age where they, by the time they get up to kind of really serious competition at an older age, national, international level, it's so ingrained. They know exactly what they're doing, exactly how long to do it for, how many reps to do. This is automatic. If you go
Oh,
to
definitely.
these tournaments, you see them just headphones on, and they go through their routine. Takes 10 minutes or whatever they're doing, and it's not even discipline at this point. It's just repetitive. It's a subconscious. They turn up, they start doing it,
Yeah, it's
and
a
I think that's where
routine.
you want to get to really.
Oh, massively, massively, and it's going back to that point of competition and competitiveness, and I don't think it's quite 20%,
Yeah,
but it's a very valid point because if it's that intrinsic innate competition, I want to win, I want to beat you, then why would you not do all the little things that will stack up and increase your chances of winning and coming out on top because you've done the right steps? So
Yeah.
it might not be 20%, but it's certainly a valid percentage that you can then, okay, do the warm up right. Okay, I've done my prep right. I've got the mental warm up right. So you've got the physical and the mental. Then you've got the actual game execution or whatever it is, and you stack it all up, and it will create 20% or 30 or 15 or whatever it is. But it's an objective improvement in your chances to win if you do all the right steps. And that's one thing that if you look at the highest level athletes, you look at the world champions, you look at Noah Lyles, or you look at LeBron James, or whoever it is, they do all of those steps, because why would you not?
Yeah. I know. I as I say, I'm a huge fan of like physical and mental warm ups in terms of their importance, and something I really promote. But it's interesting to obviously hear it from your side in terms of more the actual physiological adaptations and changes. Right, one final question for you before I let you go.
Go for
In
it.
terms of one question I get asked a lot, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of get a wide viewpoint on, is a lot of people ask me, what can I buy to help my performance? What can I go out and get? An easy, quick win to aid performance or to kind of aid me in sport or whatever it is. So if I said to you, you got £50, you're going out to the shops, what are you buying to aid performance?
I've got a visual aid for this as well.
Okay.
This electrolytes. So what a lot of people miss is hydration. And what people do is there's a great big stigma in today's society around salt because it raises your blood pressure. And in today's society where everyone who's anyone has high blood pressure, it's more of a common thing now rather than something that isn't normal. It's become the sociological norm. The only reason it's got a negative stigma is because it elevates blood pressure. But if you look into the science as to why, it is one of life's best performance enhancers, particularly in sport, but also in everyday life, because it increases your water retention. So you have more water in your blood because you have a better electrolyte salt balance. What that means is the transport of oxygen to your muscles is easier. Yes, it elevates your blood pressure, but if you don't have high blood pressure, that's not a problem. And it gets more oxygen to your body. But also, if you look at the physiological side of how a muscle contracts, how a nerve conducts, you have got to have magnesium, sodium, calcium, potassium. You've got to have them. You can't just have bog standard sodium chloride table salt. You need to have all the variables, whether you have it in your diet through bananas and things like that, or whether you have it as a supplement to drink to make sure that you're getting the right hydration levels. Is going to improve your performance. You're going to be able to contract better, react faster because of the abundance of chemicals that your body needs. But it's also going to reduce your risk of cramps. It's going to reduce your injury risk. And it's going to just generally make you a better athlete. And again, it might just be those 1-2%. But considering you can get a pack of 20 electrolyte tablets for £4,
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. It's hardly anything for the, not just in performance, but the life benefit you'll get as a result. The one caveat I'll say is make sure your blood pressure isn't really high anyway. Yeah. If it is, go and see someone about it, because that's something that needs to be addressed, because it's something that's really missed a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But for athletes, for sportsmen, for young kids growing up who won't have the atherosclerosis in their arteries, who won't have the coronary heart disease, who won't have any of those stigmatization issues, it's one of the best things you can have. And it's so cheap for what you get back from it.
I agree. And I think going back to the kind of the junior sport in particular, if you've got a parent, you've got an athlete who goes to school all day, you have no idea what they've drunk during the day. They could have drunk loads, they could have had nothing during the day. They then go off to football or tennis or athletics, whatever they're doing in the evening, and they are playing, pushing themselves hard, but they might have already had PE or some sort of physical activity during the day. They might have played sport already. And half the time, these athletes could easily be running on on pretty much empty in terms
Yeah.
of their hydration levels, and it's very hard to track. So, like you say, it's controlling the controllables really. When it's like,
Yes. Yeah.
if you take this now, be it whatever age athlete, whatever standard athlete, you are actively moving forward. Tracking water and something I'm a fan of anyway. In terms of, there's huge benefits to knowing how much water you take in a day, but like you say, if you're going to compete and you're going to train, then having that boost and having that kind of extra hydration is going to be a huge benefit to you.
Massive,
Be
massive.
it, and also there's obviously cognitive benefits as well to being hydrated, not just
Oh,
physical.
absolutely,
That's a
absolutely.
whole different kettle of fish, and that's an hour conversation on its own. But
It is, but
yeah,
it's a benefit that you will get from, just like you said, it's the small wins. It's
yeah,
the controllables. If you can control your hydration levels, not just water intake, but your salt balance and things like that, then it's going to have an impact on your cognitive, your physiological, and everywhere in between. So it's something
100%.
that is really important. And unfortunately, particularly with young kids growing up, where, like you said, they're at school, so the mum and dad don't know what they're having. And a lot of the time, they go, "Oh, have you drunk enough today?" And the kids go, "Yeah, yeah, 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 I have." And they don't know, they don't care. They
Yeah,
just want to, make mum and dad happy. Um, it's something that realistically is missed a lot in
yeah,
today's society, because the parent isn't there to track it all the time when the
mm,
kids are growing up and they're at school. And you give your kid a bottle of water and send them to school, and they go, "I want you to drink that," and refill it and drink it
mm,
again. They could just drink one and they could say they've had two. So controlling that variable, and when you go to
yeah,
training, you give them a bottle of water with with some electrolytes in it, and you say, "Right, I want you to sip on that during training or leading up to training,
yeah,
whatever it is just such a easy addition. It's so easy.
yeah,
It's so um, low effort, because a lot of people, when it comes to hard work, if it's something that's going to be hard to implement, is going to be less successful. But if it's something like this, where it's so easy to add in, just as okay, have that. It'll make you better at your sport, at your judgment. It's going to reduce your injury risk. All you've got to do is put a tiny little flavoured tablet about that big in your water, and it fizzes up like a squash. Like this one's tropical, and
yeah,
it's really, really very nice. And all I had to do was pick up a tablet and put it in the water. And it's so
yeah.
low effort, and it's such a benefit in the long run if you just do it consistently.
And I actually enjoy the taste.
I do as
I
well.
have
I do.
I use an orange one, and I actually enjoy having it. It's
Yeah.
and going back to the junior athlete side, you put it in a drink, it fizzes up, it's exciting, it's great, and you can see, when they're at school, when we go back to controlling the controllables, you can't control how hot it is in the classrooms or during the day. You can't control what they do at lunchtime. Are they playing football? Are they running around? Are they sitting in the shade? No idea. Or have they got PE that day? If they have got PE, are they playing? What sport are they playing? There's so many variables in terms of, did they run for a bus? Did they get a lift? There's so many factors to take into account. How much sun time have they got in terms of being outside? All these factors are very hard to control. But if you're taking them to football practice or a tennis lesson or whatever it is they're doing, you can say, right, I want this bottle drunk during the session. When you come off the court or come off the pitch, I want it finished. And you can somewhat control that element. And you can obviously see it, you can observe it, you can promote it. And like I say, it's not a perfect hydration plan, which you could have. If you're a high performance athlete who's tracking everything, then that's ideal. But when someone's at school, that's not necessarily doable, especially when you've got a junior athlete who's not necessarily the most disciplined when it comes to measuring out their water. Um, it's a mini controllable which you can kind of take control of. But no, thank you for today. It's been really
No
interesting
problem.
conversation. Before you go anywhere, anyone listening, how can they find you, or how can they get in touch with you if they want your services?
Yeah, so you can get in contact with me a couple of different ways, either through my social media. So it's at Jacob Wilkinson Osteopath on either Facebook or Instagram. I'm not down with the kids and things. I don't have TikTok or Twitter. I don't know how they work, but Instagram or Facebook. Alternatively, you can find me through my website. So it's www.jacobwilkinsonosteopath.co.uk. There's a lot of information on there about who I am, what I do, what my experience is, and then if someone has any questions or would like to get in touch for an appointment or anything, they can get in contact with me through there.
Perfect. No, I think it's been really, really interesting conversation today. So thank you for your time, and I'm sure we'll we'll have another chat again soon. Thank you for watching today's video. One resource I want to highlight before you go is the SP Athlete Match Journal. This is designed for athletes of all ages and abilities to be able to reflect pre and post game to help them process their emotions. This can help them with their stress, their nerves, their anxiety, and even their excitement. It will help them go into matches feeling fresh and energetic, as well as reflect after the game. It's a great resource for athletes to look at with their parents or even with their coaches. If you're interested, check out the link in the bio. Thanks again for watching.